My name is Miles Harrison, 32 years old, and I never thought I'd see my entire family crumble before my eyes. Walking into my grandfather Harold's mansion for the will reading, I felt my mother Victoria's cold glare as I entered with my girlfriend Rachel. "She's not even family," my mom whispered loudly enough for us to hear. If only they knew what Grandpa Harold had planned. The special bond we shared, the promises made in his final days. What none of them realized was that cameras were recording everything, just as my grandfather instructed. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button to see how I turned the tables on my family that day. Some of my earliest memories are filled with laughter. My father, Garrett Harrison, would swing me onto his shoulders as we walked through the park on Sunday afternoons. Mom would pack picnic lunches with my favorite peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Those days, Victoria Harrison smiled easily, her eyes crinkling at the corners whenever Dad told one of his terrible jokes. We weren't wealthy, but we were happy in our modest 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Boston. Everything changed when I turned 12. Dad was working at a construction site. He was the foreman, always proud of building things that would last. That Tuesday morning, he kissed Mom goodbye, ruffled my hair, and walked out the door whistling. By afternoon, 2 police officers were standing in our living room. A support beam had failed. My father was gone. The following months passed in a blur of black clothing, casseroles from neighbors, and my mother's vacant stares. I'd find her sitting in Dad's chair, holding his unwashed coffee mug, silent tears streaming down her face. I tried to be strong, retreating to my room to cry so she wouldn't see. Just over a year after Dad's funeral, Mom introduced me to Walter Sullivan. He was tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked hair and a confident smile. He owned Sullivan Enterprises, a development company that had projects across 3 states. Walter was charming at first, bringing me model airplane kits and taking us to expensive restaurants. 6 months later, they were married, and we moved into his mansion across town. The transition was jarring. Suddenly, I had a new stepfather, a massive house with staff who called me young Mr. Harrison, and a mother who seemed to transform overnight. Victoria Sullivan now hosted charity galas, joined country clubs, and fretted over proper table settings. Walter's true personality emerged gradually, controlling, judgmental, and fixated on appearances. "Stand up straight, Miles." Sullivan men have perfect posture. He'd correct me at dinner parties. That film stuff is a hobby, not a career. He'd dismiss whenever I mentioned my growing interest in documentaries. Mom would purse her lips but say nothing, her once warm eyes now calculating how each situation might affect their social standing. During this time, my grandfather Harold, my dad's father, became my sanctuary. Harold Harrison had built a successful construction business from nothing, the same one my father had worked for, though he'd sold it years before to enjoy retirement. While Walter flaunted his wealth with new sports cars and vacation homes, Grandpa Harold lived in the same comfortable house he'd owned for 40 years, surrounded by family photos and mementos from his travels. "Money's just a tool, Miles," he told me during one of our Saturday visits. "It's what you build with it that matters." When I turned 15, Grandpa Harold gave me my first camera, not a toy, but a proper digital video camera. While Walter scoffed, Harold encouraged my budding interest in filmmaking. "You've got your father's eye," he'd say as we reviewed my footage. He could always see things others missed. Throughout high school, as Walter and Mom pushed me toward business degrees and practical futures, Harold quietly supported my creative pursuits. He'd attend every student film showcase, sitting in the front row with a proud smile. When I won my first small festival award at 17 for a documentary about local veterans, Harold framed the certificate and kept newspaper clippings of the event. "You're building something important," he told me. "Stories that make people feel something, that's a rare gift." The contrast between my 2 male role models couldn't have been starker. Walter measured success in dollars and connections. Harold measured it in integrity, hard work, and positive impact on others. As graduation approached, the pressure from Walter and Mom intensified. Sullivan Enterprises has a place for you, Walter would remind me regularly. Starting in the mail room is just formality. You'll be in management within 2 years. My mother added her own persuasion. Think of your future, Miles. Film school is expensive, and those artistic types rarely make a decent living. But Harold countered their pragmatism with possibility. Follow what lights you up inside, he advised. Money follows passion when that passion solves problems or touches hearts. Despite the tension, I held on to hope that eventually my achievements would earn their respect. I applied to film programs behind their backs, with Harold's support. When the acceptance letter from NYU came, Harold was the first person I called. Your father would be bursting with pride, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Just like I am. I chose to believe that one day, Mom would see me clearly again. That Walter might recognize value beyond his narrow definition of success. That the distance growing between us wasn't permanent, just a temporary misunderstanding about what constituted a worthwhile life. That hope sustained me as I packed my bags for New York, determined to forge my own path despite their disapproval. 4 years later, I graduated from NYU with honors in film production. My thesis documentary about displaced factory workers had been selected for screening at 3 small festivals. It was the proudest moment of my life, standing on that stage in my cap and gown, searching the audience for familiar faces. Grandpa Harold was there, of course, beaming in the 3rd row. Mom and Walter arrived late, missing my department's awards ceremony entirely. Walter checked his phone throughout the commencement speech, while Mom fussed with her designer sunglasses. Seeming uncomfortable among the artsy crowd of proud parents embracing their creative offspring. Congratulations, Walter said afterward, his handshake firm but perfunctory. Now that this film thing is out of your system, we should talk about your start date at Sullivan. Mom handed me an envelope containing a check, generous but impersonal, with a card signed by both of them, no personal message included. They left before the reception, citing an important dinner with clients. Harold stayed. He took me and 2 of my film school friends out for a proper celebration, asking thoughtful questions about their projects and career plans. These connections you're making now, he told us, raising his glass. These are the foundations of your future. Treasure them. 6 months after graduation, while shooting behind-the-scenes footage for an independent feature film in Brooklyn, I met Rachel Bennett. She was covering the production for a local culture magazine, tall, with intelligent brown eyes and a rapid-fire interview style that impressed even the most jaded actors. We bonded over shared tastes in obscure documentaries and a mutual addiction to spicy ramen from a hole-in-the-wall spot near her apartment. Rachel understood me in ways no one else had. She came from a middle-class background in Michigan, her parents both teachers who had encouraged her journalism dreams. When I talked about my complicated family dynamics, she listened without judgment. Family expectations are the heaviest kind, she said during one of our late-night conversations. They're wrapped in love, or what passes for it, which makes them hard to put down without feeling guilty. After dating for 3 months, I finally brought Rachel to meet my family. Walter and Mom had insisted on dinner at their country club, a clear power move designed to intimidate. Rachel wore a simple black dress, her only jewelry a pendant her grandmother had given her for college graduation. The evening was a disaster from the start. Mom's gaze swept over Rachel with barely concealed disappointment, noting her lack of designer labels. Walter dominated the conversation, asking Rachel pointed questions about her family's background and career prospects in what he called the dying field of print journalism. Miles tells me you went to Michigan State, my mother said with a thin smile. How diverse. I'm sure they have some interesting programs. Rachel maintained her composure, intelligently deflecting their subtle jabs. When she mentioned her recent article about sustainable urban development that had been picked up by national outlets, Walter cut her off. Speaking of development, he turned to me. Your mother and I think it's time you stopped playing with cameras and considered your real future, Miles. Sullivan Enterprises needs fresh blood, and despite your detour, you're still family. My work isn't a detour, Walter, I replied, feeling my face flush. I've been freelancing steadily and building a solid portfolio. Freelancing? He scoffed. Is that what they call unemployment these days? The argument escalated quickly. Walter laid out his terms. Come work for Sullivan Enterprises or lose all financial support. In that moment, looking at Rachel's concerned face and feeling the weight of expectations crushing my passion, I made my choice. Keep your money, I told them, standing up. I'd rather struggle doing what I love than be comfortable doing something that makes me miserable. Mom looked stricken. Miles, don't be dramatic. Walter is offering you security. At what cost? I asked her. Dad would have understood that. The mention of my father silenced the table. Without another word, Rachel and I left. The following months were difficult financially. I moved out of my apartment, which Walter had been subsidizing, into a cramped studio in a less desirable neighborhood. Rachel helped me find freelance gigs filming corporate events and weddings to supplement my documentary work. We ate a lot of ramen, not the good kind from our favorite spot, but the 25-cent packages that sustained struggling creatives everywhere. Through it all, Rachel never complained. This is the montage section of your biopic, she joked one night as we ate dinner on milk crates because we couldn't afford a table. The struggling artist before the breakthrough. Meanwhile, my half-sister Stephanie, Walter and Victoria's daughter, who was now 19, grew increasingly distant. She'd been 12 when I left for college and had absorbed Walter's values completely during those formative years. Her Instagram showed her at exclusive clubs, on yachts with friends from her private university, all funded by Walter's seemingly endless resources. Miles refuses to grow up. I overheard her telling a friend on the phone during a rare visit to pick up the last of my belongings. Dad says some people just don't understand how the real world works. Mom made occasional attempts to reconnect, always on their terms. She'd call with opportunities, which invariably turned out to be introductions to daughters of Walter's business associates. Women from good families, with appropriate backgrounds. Alexandra's father owns half of Boston's waterfront development, she'd say, or the Caldwells have been in banking for generations. Their daughter Melissa just finished her MBA. Each setup ended the same way, awkward conversation over expensive meals, followed by my polite but firm explanation that I was in a committed relationship with Rachel. The most painful discovery came through an industry contact who pulled me aside at a networking event. You're Harrison, right? Garrett's kid? He asked, recognition dawning. Man, your dad was one of the good ones. Nothing like your stepfather. You know Walter? I asked. Unfortunately. Look. You should know he's been telling people in the industry to think twice before hiring you. Says you're unreliable, difficult to work with. Some bullshit about you abandoning family obligations. That night, I called Grandpa Harold, devastated. Why would he actively try to sabotage me? Harold sighed heavily. Some men can't stand being refused, Miles. Walter offered you a place in his kingdom, and you chose freedom instead. To him, that's not just rejection, it's a threat to his worldview. So what do I do? Keep building your reputation brick by brick, Harold said. Quality work speaks for itself, eventually. And Miles? I'm proud of you for standing your ground. Those words from Harold gave me strength to continue despite feeling betrayed by the people who should have supported me most. His belief in me was a lighthouse guiding me through the fog of doubt and disappointment. 2 years after that disastrous dinner, Grandpa Harold was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The prognosis was grim, 6 months at best. When he called to tell me, his voice was steady, pragmatic as always. No point sugarcoating it, Miles. The docs say it's spread too far for surgery. We're looking at comfort measures now. I immediately rearranged my work schedule, turning down a promising commercial project to free up my evenings. Rachel supported my decision without hesitation, often bringing dinner to the hospital when I'd go straight there after filming. Those hospital evenings became precious. Harold, despite his declining health, was more talkative than ever, sharing stories about my father that I'd never heard, wisdom about business that he'd accumulated over decades, and observations about family dynamics that proved surprisingly insightful. Your grandmother Elizabeth, now there was a woman who could see through anyone's facade, he told me one evening. She'd have liked Rachel. Same kind of backbone. What troubled me was how rarely Victoria and Walter visited. They'd make appearances on weekends, staying briefly, Walter always checking his watch or taking calls in the hallway. Mom would fuss with Harold's pillows or the flowers, but real conversation seemed beyond her capacity. Don't judge your mother too harshly, Harold said after they'd left one Sunday. Victoria lost herself when your father died. Walter offered security when she was drowning in uncertainty. That doesn't excuse how she's treated me, I said, adjusting his blanket. No, it doesn't, Harold agreed. But understanding helps with forgiveness, when you're ready. As his strength ebbed, Harold began sharing concerns about Sullivan Enterprises. Walter's been making moves, he confided one night. Taking risks that aren't sitting right with me. What kind of risks? I asked. Cutting corners on materials. Pushing projects through inspection with the right handshakes, acquiring land through questionable means. Your father would never have stood for it. These revelations troubled me deeply. Dad had always emphasized doing things right, even when it cost more or took longer. It was one of the core values he'd instilled in me. The company carries the Harrison name too, Harold continued. Started by my father, built by my hands, strengthened by your dad. Walter may run it now, but he doesn't understand its foundation. Over the following weeks, Harold asked me to record our conversations. For posterity, he claimed, though I sensed other motives behind the request. Rachel, with her journalistic instincts, helped me compile the recordings and suggested we look deeper into Walter's business practices. Using her press credentials and my family connections, we began discreetly gathering information. What we uncovered was disturbing: tax documents showing possible fraud, testimony from subcontractors about being pressured to use substandard materials, evidence of environmental regulations being flouted at multiple development sites. I was accessing some company files in Harold's home office when Walter walked in unexpectedly. What exactly do you think you're doing? He demanded, his face flushing with anger. Research for a documentary about family businesses, I replied, not entirely untruthfully. Grandpa Harold gave me permission. Walter's eyes narrowed. Harold is dying and not thinking clearly. Touch any more company documents, and I'll have you charged with corporate espionage. That night, I told Harold about the confrontation. To my surprise, he smiled faintly. Good, he said. He's nervous. He should be. The next day, Victoria called me, her voice tight with controlled fury. Walter says you're manipulating Harold for inheritance purposes. How could you take advantage of him when he's vulnerable like this? That's not what's happening, Mom. I tried to explain. Grandpa asked me to. I don't want to hear it. She cut me off. First you throw away the opportunities we offered you. Now you're trying to turn Harold against us. I thought I raised you better. A family meeting was called the following week. Harold insisted on leaving the hospital for it. Despite his weakened condition, Walter, Victoria, Stephanie and I gathered in Harold's living room, tension thick in the air. Harold, Walter began smoothly, we're concerned about some of the influences around you during this difficult time. His gaze flicked meaningfully toward me. Miles has been spending time with you out of genuine concern, Victoria added. But he's young and might not understand the implications of certain conversations. Stephanie, scrolling through her phone, barely looked up. Yeah, Grandpa, Miles is just like... always recording stuff for his films or whatever. Walter leaned forward. We think it would be prudent to review your estate plans. Ensure everything is in proper order considering the circumstances. I watched Harold's face, expecting anger at their transparent attempt to manipulate him. Instead, he nodded slowly. Perhaps you're right, Walter. Things should be properly arranged. Walter couldn't hide his satisfied expression. I'll have our attorneys prepare the necessary documents. As the meeting concluded, Harold caught my eye and winked so quickly I almost missed it. That subtle gesture reassured me he wasn't being fooled. Harold's health deteriorated rapidly over the next month. I spent as much time with him as possible, often sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair by his bed. Rachel would bring fresh clothes and take away laundry, supporting me without complaint. During one of his more lucid moments, Harold beckoned me closer. Miles, I need you to understand something important, he whispered. What matters isn't what you own, but what you stand for. Remember that when everything seems confusing. I will, Grandpa. I promise. Holding his increasingly frail hand. There's an envelope in my desk at home, bottom right drawer. After I'm gone, but before anything else happens, read what's inside. 2 days later. Harold passed peacefully in his sleep. I was the only one present, having sent Rachel home to rest. Victoria and Walter arrived 20 minutes after my call, too late to say goodbye. Why didn't you call us sooner? Victoria demanded, mascara tracking down her cheeks. It happened quickly. I explained, my own grief raw and overwhelming. He wasn't in pain. Walter put his arm around my mother, his expression unreadable. At least someone was with him, he said, though his tone suggested an accusation rather than gratitude. The funeral was everything Harold would have hated, ostentatious, formal, filled with business associates rather than friends. Walter had taken control of the arrangements, overriding my suggestions for a simpler service. Stephanie spent most of the memorial service taking selfies in her black designer dress, captioning them with hashtags about grief. I delivered a heartfelt eulogy about Harold's integrity, work ethic, and capacity for unconditional love. Walter followed with remarks that seemed more focused on Harold's business acumen and connection to Sullivan Enterprises than the man himself. At the reception, I overheard Stephanie talking to her friends. Mom says once everything's settled with the will, we're renovating Grandpa's house. It's so dated, but the property is prime real estate. I walked away before I said something I'd regret, finding Rachel by the buffet table. She squeezed my hand in silent support. I feel like I'm the only one actually mourning him. I confessed quietly. You're not, she assured me. I've spoken to several of his old friends. They knew the real Harold, just like you did. That night, I retrieved the envelope from Harold's desk as instructed. Inside was a letter and a small key. Miles, it began in Harold's distinctive handwriting. If you're reading this, I've moved on to whatever comes next. Before the will reading, go to Boston First National Bank. Box 247. The key enclosed will open it. What you find there will help you understand what happens next. Trust yourself. I do, Harold. The next morning, I did as instructed, finding a safety deposit box containing a USB drive, a leather-bound journal, and another sealed envelope marked Open after the will reading. The USB drive contained folders of financial records, emails, and recorded conversations, all documenting Walter's questionable business practices over the past decade. The journal was Harold's detailed account of his suspicions and investigations into Walter's activities. I sat in my car outside the bank, overwhelmed by what Harold had entrusted to me. Whatever was coming at the will reading, Harold had been preparing for it, and me, for years. The will reading was scheduled for 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, 1 week after the funeral. Harold's attorney, Edmund Blackwell, had requested everyone gather at Harold's home rather than his office downtown. The formal invitation included a strange stipulation. As per Mr. Harrison's explicit instructions, the reading will begin precisely at the appointed time, with or without all parties present. Rachel and I arrived at 5 minutes to 10. Having been delayed by unexpected construction downtown. Walter's Mercedes and Victoria's Range Rover already occupied the circular driveway. As we hurried up the front steps, I could feel my heart pounding with apprehension. The grand living room had been arranged with chairs facing Harold's antique mahogany desk, behind which sat Edmund Blackwell, silver-haired and solemn in an impeccable charcoal suit. Walter and Victoria occupied the front row, with Stephanie beside them, still texting rapidly on her phone. Several of Harold's business associates and a few distant relatives filled the remaining seats. All eyes turned to us as we entered. I guided Rachel to 2 empty chairs in the second row, acutely aware of the whispers our arrival had triggered. "She's not even family," my mother stage whispered to Walter, loud enough for several people to hear. Rachel stiffened beside me, but maintained her composure. Walter didn't bother hiding his smirk, confident in whatever outcome he anticipated. Stephanie barely looked up from her phone, obviously considering the whole proceeding a tedious obligation. Edmund cleared his throat precisely at 10 o'clock. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered to execute the last will and testament of Harold James Harrison." He opened a leather portfolio and adjusted his reading glasses. I will note for the record that Mr. Harrison was of sound mind when this will was last updated 3 months ago, as attested by 2 physicians and witnessed by myself and my associate. Walter shifted impatiently. Yes. The standard disclaimers. Can we proceed to the substance, Edmund? Edmund's expression remained neutral, though I detected a flicker of annoyance. As you wish, Mr. Sullivan. I'll begin with the specific bequests. He detailed several modest gifts to longtime employees and friends. His housekeeper received a generous sum. His gardener of 20 years was given the vintage truck he'd always admired. Various personal items were distributed among relatives with sentimental attachments. To my grandson, Miles Garrett Harrison, Edmund continued, I leave my collection of photographs, family memorabilia, personal journals, and the contents of my home office, including all records and documents contained therein. Walter relaxed visibly, exchanging a satisfied glance with Victoria. Clearly, they assumed I was receiving only sentimental items of little monetary value. And regarding Sullivan Enterprises and all associated holdings, properties, and financial interests. Edmund paused, adjusting his glasses again. The room grew completely silent. Walter leaned forward, his expression eager. I hereby bequeath controlling interest and all my shares to my grandson, Miles Harrison. For a moment, it seemed as though time itself had stopped. No one moved. No one spoke. Then reality crashed back with stunning force. Victoria gasped audibly, her face draining of color. Walter jumped to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. This is preposterous, he shouted, face reddening. Harold wasn't in his right mind. This will was clearly made under undue influence. He jabbed a finger in my direction. He's been manipulating Harold for months, filling his head with lies. Edmund remained impassive. Mr. Sullivan, if you'll allow me to continue. There is an additional clause. I don't care about additional clauses. This will is going to be contested. Walter. Edmund's voice took on a steely quality I hadn't heard before. You might want to hear this part before making threats. Walter fell silent, though his breathing remained heavy and erratic. Mr. Harrison anticipated objections. Edmund continued. He therefore arranged for these proceedings to be recorded. With a small remote control, Edmund activated a switch. Suddenly, small red lights became visible throughout the room, in the bookshelf, near picture frames, beside table lamps. Hidden cameras, at least a dozen of them, had been capturing everything from multiple angles. "What the hell is this?" Walter demanded, his gaze darting around the room. "Harold's instructions were explicit," Edmund explained, producing a sealed envelope. "In the event of any challenge to his will, these recordings would be submitted as evidence of the mental and emotional states of all parties involved." He opened the envelope. He also left this letter to be read aloud if such objections arose. Edmund began reading Harold's words. "To my family and friends gathered today." If Edmund is reading this letter, it means my decisions have been questioned, likely by Walter. I anticipated this. For the past 5 years, I have been quietly investigating the management of what was once Harrison Construction, now Sullivan Enterprises. What I discovered deeply troubled me. Walter has systematically undermined the ethical foundations upon which our family business was built, pursuing profit at the expense of quality, safety, and legal compliance. Victoria made a small, wounded sound. Stephanie finally looked up from her phone, confusion evident on her face. "I could not, in good conscience, allow this legacy to continue under such leadership," Edmund read on. "Miles has demonstrated the integrity, compassion, and vision that were the true hallmarks of our family business. While he has chosen a different professional path, I believe he will ensure the company returns to its ethical foundations, even if that means significant restructuring." Walter collapsed back into his chair, ashen-faced. "The cameras recording this moment were installed last month," Edmund continued reading. "They will capture the true reactions of everyone present, revealing who mourns the man versus who covets the inheritance. I may be gone, but I am watching. Choose your next actions wisely. They will reveal your true character to everyone present, and potentially to legal authorities, should certain business activities come to light." The letter concluded with Harold's signature, notarized and dated just 3 weeks before his death. In the stunned silence that followed, I found myself standing, moving as if in a dream toward Edmund's desk. The attorney handed me another envelope, smaller, personal. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this privately," he said quietly. "But given the circumstances, perhaps now is appropriate." Inside was a handwritten note. "Miles, the desk chair is yours now. Sit in it with the same integrity that guided your father and me. The cameras aren't just for today. They've been recording Walter's business meetings in my home office for months. The evidence is in your hands. Use it wisely. With love and confidence, Grandpa Harold." I looked up at the beautiful antique chair behind the desk where Edmund sat. My grandfather's chair. My father's before his death. The symbolic seat of Harrison family leadership. With a nod to Edmund, who stood and stepped aside, I moved behind the desk and sat in my grandfather's chair, feeling its solid support beneath me. "This is absolutely ridiculous," Walter sputtered, though his voice lacked conviction. "A filmmaker with zero business experience cannot possibly run a company of this magnitude." "Actually," I said, finding my voice at last, "I've been learning about the business for years through my conversations with Grandpa Harold. And it seems I already understand something fundamental that you never grasped, Walter." "And what might that be?" he sneered. "That a company isn't just balance sheets and profit margins. It's people. It's reputation. It's the legacy you leave in the communities where you build." I opened the desk drawer, finding exactly what I expected, a folder labeled "Succession Plan" in Harold's handwriting. And Grandpa made sure I wouldn't be doing it alone. Victoria was openly weeping now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Stephanie looked shell-shocked, her phone forgotten in her lap. And Walter, the always confident, controlling Walter, seemed to physically shrink before my eyes, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. Rachel moved to stand beside me, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. The message was clear to everyone in the room. We were a united front, facing whatever came next together. In that moment of absolute clarity, I understood the full scope of what my grandfather had orchestrated. This wasn't just about inheritance or business control. It was his final lesson to all of us about values, character, and consequences. Walter recovered his composure quickly, falling back on intimidation tactics that had served him well in business. "This is far from over," he declared, standing rigidly. Harold was clearly not of sound mind in his final months. "No judge will uphold this absurd will once we present evidence of Miles' manipulation." Edmund calmly retrieved another document from his portfolio. "Actually, Mr. Sullivan, I have here signed statements from Harold's primary physician, oncologist, and a court-appointed psychiatrist, all attesting to his mental clarity and decision-making capacity until his final days." He held up a USB drive. "Additionally, I possess recorded conversations between Harold and myself spanning the past year, in which he thoroughly explains his reasoning for these decisions." Walter's confidence wavered visibly. Victoria, still processing the shock, reached for his arm. "Walter, perhaps we should discuss this privately before making threats." "There's nothing to discuss," Walter snapped. "I'm calling our attorneys immediately." He turned toward the door, clearly intending to leave. "I wouldn't do that quite yet," I said, standing from Harold's chair. "There are some other matters we need to address first." I opened the folder Harold had left, removing several documents and photographs. "These are copies of internal Sullivan Enterprises memos authorizing the use of substandard concrete on the Riverside development, despite engineering warnings." I laid them on the desk. "And these are photos of the resulting structural issues that were cosmetically covered rather than properly repaired." Walter froze mid-stride. "There's more," I continued. "Records of systematic bribery of building inspectors. Environmental violations deliberately hidden from regulatory agencies. Tax documents showing clear discrepancies designed to hide profits." The color drained from Walter's face. "Where did you get those?" "That's private company information." "From Grandpa Harold," I replied simply. "He may have sold the company to you, but he never stopped paying attention. And when he saw what you were doing to his family's legacy, he started keeping records." Victoria stepped forward, her expression shifting from shock to something harder. "Miles, whatever issues you have with Walter, dragging the family business through the mud helps no one. Think about what this would do to all of us, including yourself." "I have thought about it, Mom. For weeks now. That's why I'm offering Walter a choice." Walter's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of choice?" "Option 1. You resign from Sullivan Enterprises immediately, with a reasonable severance package that Edmund has already prepared. You sign a non-disclosure agreement about the company's past issues, and in return, these documents stay private." "And option 2? Walter asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "I take everything to the authorities. The district attorney's office would be particularly interested in the evidence of bribery and tax fraud." Stephanie, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke up. "Dad, what is he talking about? Did you really do those things?" Walter ignored her, focusing his fury on me. "You ungrateful little—" "I'm not finished," I interrupted calmly. "There's a third option, actually. Rachel suggested it, and it's the one I hope you'll choose." Rachel stepped forward. "Mr. Sullivan, Miles could legally pursue you for the company's past misdeeds. But that would damage many innocent employees and the Harrison family name that Miles values. Instead, we're proposing a controlled transition." I nodded. "You stay on as a consultant for 6 months, helping transfer your knowledge of current projects. You publicly announce your retirement, maintaining your reputation. In exchange, you cooperate fully with correcting the ethical issues within the company, and all evidence of past wrongdoing remains confidential." Edmund added, "This option allows everyone to save face while ensuring the company returns to ethical operations. It's the option Harold hoped you would take." Victoria looked at me with newfound understanding. "You're offering him a way out." "I'm offering all of us a way forward," I corrected gently. Walter seemed to calculate his options, his businessman's mind working rapidly behind his eyes. And if I refuse all three options? I gestured to the still active cameras around the room. Then this entire conversation, including your reaction to evidence of corporate wrongdoing, becomes part of the record. Victoria turned to Walter, her voice urgent but controlled. Walter, please. Think about what's best for everyone. For a moment, I thought I saw vulnerability crack through Walter's facade, fear, perhaps, or even regret. Then his expression hardened again. Edmund, he barked, is there somewhere we can speak privately? I need to review these supposed options in detail. Edmund nodded. The study is available. As Walter followed Edmund out, Victoria approached me hesitantly. Miles, I don't understand. When did all this happen? How long have you known? About Walter's business practices? Grandpa started sharing his concerns during his hospital stays. About the will? I had no idea until today. That's not what Walter has been saying, she replied, doubt evident in her voice. He told me you've been plotting this for months, manipulating Harold when he was vulnerable. And you believed him, just like always. The hurt I'd suppressed for years edged into my voice. When did you stop trusting me, Mom? When did his version of reality become more credible than your own son's? Victoria flinched as if I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. Walter he seemed so certain. He always does. I said softly. That's his power over you. Stephanie approached cautiously, her usual confidence absent. Miles, I didn't know about any of this. Dad always said you abandoned the family because you couldn't handle real responsibility. Is that what you really believed, Stephanie? Or was it just easier to accept his narrative? She looked down, unable to meet my eyes. I guess I never really questioned it. You were gone, and Dad's version made sense from what I could see. Rachel, always perceptive, stepped in. Sometimes the stories we're told shape what we're able to see in the first place. Stephanie nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to understand that. While we waited for Walter and Edmund to return, I examined Harold's folder more thoroughly. It contained not just evidence of wrongdoing, but a detailed transition plan, including names of trustworthy executives within the company, recommendations for board restructuring, and even a communication strategy for employees and shareholders. He thought of everything. I murmured to Rachel. He knew you, Miles, she replied. He knew you'd want to do this right. 30 minutes later, Walter and Edmund returned. Walter's expression was unreadable, but the stiff set of his shoulders told me everything I needed to know. I've reviewed the options, he announced tersely. I'll accept your third proposal, with some amendments that Edmund will finalize. A wise choice, Edmund commented. Walter fixed me with a cold stare. Don't think this makes us reconciled, Miles. I'm doing this for the sake of Victoria and Stephanie, not you. I understand, I replied evenly. This isn't about reconciliation. It's about doing what's right for the company and the Harrison legacy. As if on cue, the front door opened, and several senior executives from Sullivan Enterprises entered, summoned by Edmund as part of Harold's carefully orchestrated plan. Among them was Gerald Watkins, the CFO who had always seemed uncomfortable during Walter's more aggressive business maneuvers. Gerald, everyone, thank you for coming, Edmund greeted them. As discussed on the phone, Harold's will has named Miles as the new controlling shareholder of Sullivan Enterprises. We're here to begin the transition process. Walter's face tightened, but he maintained his composure. I'll be staying on as a consultant during the transition, he managed to say, the words clearly painful. The executive's expressions ranged from shock to curiosity to carefully concealed relief. Gerald Watkins stepped forward, offering his hand to me. Miles, I worked with your grandfather and father for many years before the company changed hands. If you're even half the man they were, Sullivan Enterprises is in good hands. As the business discussion commenced, Victoria pulled me aside. Miles, I need to ask you something, and I need the truth. Her voice trembled slightly. Has Walter been controlling the company the way he's been controlling our family? The question surprised me with its insight. Yes, Mom. From everything Grandpa discovered, yes. She nodded slowly, something resolving in her expression. I think I've made some terrible mistakes, Miles. Not just with the company, but with you. We can talk about that, I told her. Not quite ready to offer forgiveness, but opening the door to possibility. After we get through today. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of introductions, explanations, and preliminary planning. Walter maintained a frigid professional demeanor, answering questions when asked but volunteering nothing extra. Victoria watched the proceedings with newfound awareness, occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about company operations. Stephanie, to her credit, set aside her phone and paid attention. During a brief break, she approached me awkwardly. So, is there maybe a place for me in all this? She asked. I'm studying business administration, you know. Not just partying all the time like everyone thinks. Honestly? I don't know yet. Stephanie, I answered truthfully. But if you're genuinely interested, we can explore possibilities. Not because of your last name, but based on what you can contribute. She nodded, seeming to appreciate the candor. That's fair. More than fair, actually. As the executives departed and the initial shock of the day began to settle, I found myself alone in Harold's study, now my study, I supposed. The weight of responsibility felt simultaneously overwhelming and right. Like a perfectly tailored suit that required some getting used to. Rachel found me there, gazing at the photograph of my father and grandfather at the groundbreaking of their first major project. How are you holding up? She asked, closing the door behind her. Still processing, I admitted. Grandpa orchestrated all of this so carefully. But he couldn't tell me because he needed my reactions to be genuine. He trusted you to handle it when the time came, she said, perching on the edge of the desk. And you did. I reached for her hand. We did. I couldn't have navigated today without you. Partners, remember? She smiled. In documentaries and corporate drama alike. As evening approached, Walter and Victoria prepared to leave, the day's revelations having irreversibly altered our family dynamic. I'll have my things removed from the office by Friday, Walter informed me stiffly. Victoria lingered after he walked out. Miles, I know it's too soon to ask for forgiveness, but I hope eventually we can find a way back to being family again. I hope so too, Mom, I replied, meaning it despite everything. It won't be quick or easy, but the door isn't closed. After they left, I returned to Harold's chair, my chair now, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside, exactly where he told me to look, was a sealed envelope with my name written in his distinctive handwriting. For after the storm passes, the envelope read, Open when you're alone. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just a few lines. Miles, if you're reading this, you've weathered the first test of leadership. Remember, power isn't the goal, it's merely the tool. What you build with it defines you. Your father would be as proud as I am. With love and complete confidence, Harold. I carefully folded the note and returned it to the envelope. Then sat back in the chair that had passed from grandfather to father to me, feeling the weight of their legacy, and the freedom to shape it in my own way. The first month as the controlling shareholder of Sullivan Enterprises was a crash course in business management unlike anything I could have prepared for. Each day brought new challenges. Reviewing financial reports, meeting with project managers, addressing concerns from employees uncertain about the company's new direction. Harold's journal proved invaluable, containing insights about key personnel and ongoing projects that helped me navigate the complex corporate landscape. Gerald Watkins, the CFO, became a trusted advisor, patiently explaining financial intricacies and identifying areas where Walter's leadership had created problems. The Riverview Heights project is our most immediate concern, Gerald explained during one of our early morning sessions. Walter cut costs on foundation work to improve profit margins. The municipal inspector passed it because of, well, an arrangement Walter had with him. How bad is it? I asked. Not catastrophic yet, but it could be if not addressed. We're talking about 68 families who will eventually move into those townhomes. I didn't hesitate. Halt construction. Bring in independent engineers to assess what needs to be fixed. And let's do it right. Gerald smiled slightly. That's what your grandfather said you'd say. I've already drafted a plan for the repairs and a revised budget. The decision cost the company $3 million and delayed the project by 4 months, but it was the only ethical choice. I used the situation as an opportunity to publicly announce Sullivan Enterprises' renewed commitment to quality and safety, even at the expense of immediate profits. Walter, as agreed, remained as a consultant, though our interactions were strictly professional and often tense. He couldn't hide his disdain when I reversed several of his business strategies, particularly those that had prioritized quick profits over sustainable growth. You're leaving money on the table, he criticized during one transition meeting. The West Side development could be 30% more profitable if you just build at the originally planned density and create infrastructure problems for the whole neighborhood, I countered. We're building communities, not just structures. That means considering long-term impact. Victoria surprised me by filing for divorce 3 weeks after the will reading. She requested a meeting at my office rather than at their home, a clear statement of her changing priorities. Walter isn't who I thought he was, she explained, looking both vulnerable and determined. Or maybe he was, and I just refused to see it. Either way, I can't continue pretending. Are you sure about this, Mom? It's a big change after 20 years. She nodded firmly. When your father died, I was terrified of being alone, of raising you without help. Walter seemed so strong, so certain about everything. That certainty was intoxicating. She twisted her wedding ring absently. But there's a difference between strength and control. I'm only beginning to understand how much of myself I surrendered. As Victoria reclaimed her independence, she gradually revealed how Walter had isolated her from friends, controlled their finances, and subtly undermined her confidence over years. The woman who had once been vibrant and loving had been reduced to an anxious shadow, always checking her behavior against Walter's expectations. I don't expect us to immediately return to how we were before, she said during one of our cautious lunch meetings. But I'd like the chance to be your mother again, the real me. Not Walter's version. While navigating these family dynamics, I was also transforming the company culture. Rachel suggested creating a documentary about ethical business transformation as both a marketing tool and a way to hold ourselves publicly accountable. Show the process transparently, she proposed. The challenges, the costs, the benefits. It positions Sullivan Enterprises as a leader in corporate responsibility and gives you a chance to use your filmmaking skills in service of the business. The project became a bridge between my two worlds, business and filmmaking, allowing me to integrate my passions rather than choosing between them. I brought in my former film school colleague Marcus as lead videographer, creating a small but dedicated media team within the company. Stephanie approached me about a month into the transition, asking if she could shadow different departments during her summer break from college. I want to understand the business properly, she explained, uncharacteristically serious. Not just the executive sweet stuff Dad focused on, but how everything actually works. I arranged a rotating internship program for her, starting with the architectural department and moving through construction management, customer service, and finance. To my surprise, she proved to be observant and hardworking, earning respect from the employees rather than trading on the family name. The site managers actually listened to the construction crews, she noted after her second week. Dad always said workers just want to cut corners if you don't watch them constantly, but that's not what I'm seeing at all. Most people take pride in their work if you let them, I replied. Grandpa Harold always said respect flows in both directions. As we implemented ethical reforms throughout the company, we encountered resistance from some of Walter's loyal executives. Their skepticism was understandable. Many had been rewarded handsomely for facilitating Walter's approach to business. "This new direction is admirable, Miles, but unrealistic in today's market," argued Thomas Brennan, the head of land acquisition, during a particularly tense board meeting. "Our competitors won't be burdening themselves with these additional expenses. Then we'll distinguish ourselves through quality and integrity," I responded. "I'm not interested in winning a race to the bottom." Several executives chose to leave rather than adapt. I viewed this as ultimately healthy for the company, though the transition period was challenging. With Gerald's help, we promoted from within where possible, prioritizing employees who demonstrated both competence and ethical alignment. Rachel's journalistic instincts proved invaluable during this restructuring. She had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was presenting a polished facade rather than genuine commitment to our new direction. Though she maintained her independent career, she became an unofficial consultant on our communication strategy, helping translate corporate jargon into authentic messaging. Victoria, meanwhile, discovered financial irregularities in her personal accounts during the divorce proceedings. Walter had systematically diverted her inheritance from her parents into investments under his sole control, effectively ensuring her financial dependence. "I feel so foolish," she confessed during one of our increasingly candid conversations. "How did I not notice what was happening?" "That's how financial abuse works, Mom," I explained gently. "It's incremental and often disguised as taking care of things for you." With the help of Edmund Blackwell and a forensic accountant, we were able to recover much of Victoria's assets. The process revealed the extent of Walter's controlling behavior and helped me understand how my mother had changed so dramatically after remarrying. 6 months into my leadership, I established the Harold Harrison Memorial Scholarship for young filmmakers, providing funding for documentary projects focused on community impact. The program connected my grandfather's legacy with my own passion for visual storytelling, while creating opportunities for creative voices that might otherwise go unheard. Walter made one final attempt at sabotage when his consulting period ended. He leaked selective information to a business journalist, suggesting the company was struggling under my inexperienced leadership. The story gained traction briefly, until Rachel helped me craft a response strategy. Rather than issuing a standard corporate denial, I created a 10-minute video documenting our transformation process, including transparent discussion of the challenges we'd faced and the financial investments required to correct past issues. The video included interviews with employees, community members, and industry experts who validated our approach. "You can't fake authenticity," Rachel advised during production. "Show the messy reality, not a polished corporate image." The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several industry publications featuring our transparency as a case study in ethical business transformation. Applications to work at Sullivan Enterprises increased 30%, and we began attracting clients specifically interested in environmentally and socially responsible development. Throughout this period, I continued reviewing Harold's journals, discovering how thoroughly he had been preparing me for leadership, even when I thought we were just having casual conversations. His insights about personnel, market trends, and potential pitfalls had been carefully woven into our hospital room discussions. One evening, while reviewing these journals with Rachel in what had been Harold's home office, I discovered a hidden compartment in his desk containing a letter addressed to Miles and Rachel. "He knew," Rachel said softly as we read it together. "He saw where we were headed as a couple before we fully did." The letter contained Harold's blessing and his hope that we would build both a life and a legacy together, one founded on the values we shared. "Some partnerships are formed in boardrooms," he wrote, "but the most meaningful ones begin in the heart and extend to all aspects of life." As the 1-year mark of Harold's passing approached, I found myself thinking more about my father as well, wondering what he would make of the path my life had taken. Hoping he would be proud of how I'd honored the Harrison name while remaining true to my own passions. One unexpected connection came through Victoria, who had been sorting through storage boxes as part of her fresh start. She brought me a dusty portfolio I hadn't seen since childhood. "I kept all your early artwork and films," she admitted, seeming almost shy. "Walter thought it was sentimental nonsense, so I hid them away. But I could never bring myself to throw them out." Inside were crayon drawings from elementary school, high school film festival certificates, and even the script for my first serious documentary attempt, all preserved despite Walter's dismissal of my creative pursuits. "You never completely lost yourself, did you, Mom?" I asked, deeply moved by this evidence of her quiet rebellion. "Not completely," she acknowledged with a small smile. "There was always a part of me that remembered who we were before, who you were meant to be." That revelation marked a turning point in our healing relationship, opening the door to genuine reconciliation rather than merely polite coexistence. As autumn arrived, bringing the anniversary of Harold's death, I found myself not just managing his legacy but actively building upon it. Sullivan Enterprises was becoming known for innovative, sustainable development projects. My documentary about ethical business transformation was being featured at business schools. And most importantly, the foundation of family, so damaged by years of Walter's influence, was slowly being rebuilt on healthier ground. Harold had seen all of this potential when others, including myself, had been blinded by immediate circumstances. His final gift hadn't been the company or the wealth, but the opportunity to reconcile all parts of myself, the businessman and the artist, the professional and the personal, into a coherent whole. He played the long game, Rachel observed one evening as we reviewed plans for the memorial event we were organizing. While everyone else was focused on the next quarter or the next deal, Harold was thinking about generations. "That's the perspective I want to maintain," I replied, understanding more deeply than ever the true nature of my inheritance. Not just what benefits us now, but what creates possibility for the future. 1 year to the day after Harold's passing, we gathered at his favorite spot, a hilltop overlooking the city where 3 generations of Harrisons had helped shape the skyline. Unlike the formal funeral Walter had orchestrated, this memorial was intimate and authentic, bringing together family, close friends, and employees who had truly known and valued Harold. Victoria arrived early, helping arrange wildflowers, Harold's preference over formal arrangements. She had transformed over the past year, rediscovering her independence and purpose through volunteer work with a housing assistance program for single parents. The divorce had been finalized 4 months earlier, with Walter accepting a settlement much smaller than expected, likely to avoid further scrutiny of his financial dealings. Stephanie came directly from the office, having recently accepted a part-time position in the company's community engagement department, while finishing her business degree. Her genuine interest in the human impact of development projects had surprised everyone, especially herself. "Grandpa would love this," she commented, surveying the informal gathering. "No pretense. Just people who actually cared about him." Rachel and I had prepared a simple tribute, a collection of stories and photographs compiled from everyone who wished to contribute, bound in a leather volume similar to Harold's journals. As people arrived, they added handwritten notes and memories, creating a living document of his impact. Walter was noticeably absent, having declined the invitation. The previous week, he had pleaded guilty to tax fraud and securities violations, accepting a plea deal that included restitution and community service but avoided prison time. His public disgrace had been painful to witness, despite everything. "I visited him yesterday," I told Rachel privately as we set up chairs for the memorial. "Felt like something I needed to do." "How was it?" she asked, concern evident in her expression. "Strange. Subdued. He's lost everything that defined him, his reputation, his social standing, most of his fortune. For the first time, he seemed human. Did you find any closure? I considered the question carefully. Not closure exactly. But I told him I forgive him, even though he didn't ask for it. Not for his sake, but for mine. I don't want to carry that weight anymore. As the memorial began, the late afternoon sun cast a golden light across the hillside. I stood before the small gathering, feeling a profound sense of continuity with the past and responsibility to the future. Harold Harrison understood something fundamental about legacy. I began. It's not about buildings or bank accounts. It's about the values that outlive us, carried forward by the people we've touched. I shared stories of Harold's integrity in business deals, his quiet generosity toward employees facing hardships, and his unwavering belief in second chances. Several long-time employees spoke about how Harold had given them opportunities when others wouldn't, based on his assessment of character rather than credentials. Victoria surprised everyone by speaking as well, her voice steady despite the emotion evident in her eyes. Harold never gave up on any of us, even when we lost our way, she said, glancing meaningfully at me. He understood that families, like buildings, need solid foundations but also room to grow and change. That's the wisdom I hope to carry forward. As the formal portion of the memorial concluded, I asked everyone to join in a toast with Harold's favorite whiskey, not the expensive brand Walter had always insisted on serving at company functions, but the modest bottle Harold had genuinely preferred. To seeing beyond the surface, I proposed, raising my glass, to building things that last. During the informal gathering that followed, Rachel and I found a quiet moment alone, watching the sunset from Harold's favorite bench. I have something I've been wanting to share, she said, taking my hand. I've been waiting for the right moment. From her bag, she produced a small velvet box, not a jewelry box as I initially thought, but a case containing 2 antique keys. I've been researching that property Harold mentioned to you last year, the riverfront land he thought would make a perfect mixed-use development with affordable housing. I found the owner, and they're willing to sell. She smiled. These are the keys to the caretaker's cottage. I thought we could go see it tomorrow, start envisioning what it could become. That's perfect, I said, deeply moved by her thoughtfulness. A project that combines everything: sustainable business, creative vision, community impact. And maybe, she added with a meaningful look, a place for us to build something personal too. I thought the cottage might make a good weekend home to start with, and eventually, I completed her thought, a place for a family of our own someday. As the gathering concluded, Victoria approached us, her expression serene in a way I hadn't seen since before my father's death. Your announcement during the memorial, she said, about you and Rachel getting engaged. It was the perfect moment, exactly what Harold would have wanted. He always said you two were perfectly matched, your vision and her practicality. He saw it before we did. Rachel acknowledged, the simple engagement ring we had selected together catching the last rays of sunlight. He had a gift for seeing potential, I agreed. In people, in places, in situations others might write off. Walking back to our cars as twilight settled over the hillside, I felt Harold's presence not as a weight of expectation but as a foundation of support. The company was thriving under its new ethical direction. My documentary about the transformation had been accepted at 2 prestigious festivals. Victoria was rediscovering herself. Stephanie was finding her own path rather than following Walter's blueprint. And most importantly, Rachel and I were building a partnership that integrated all aspects of our lives: professional ambitions, creative pursuits, and personal connection. That evening, I returned to Harold's study, now my study, and opened the leather-bound tribute book from the memorial. On the final page, I added my own message. Thank you for teaching me that true inheritance isn't what we receive, but what we give. That family is defined by love and respect, not convenience or obligation. That integrity matters more than image. These lessons will guide me as I build upon your foundation, honoring the past while creating a future that would make you proud. I closed the book and placed it on the shelf beside Harold's journals, understanding now that the most valuable assets he'd left me weren't recorded in legal documents or financial statements. The real inheritance was the wisdom to distinguish between what matters and what merely appears to matter, a lesson I would someday pass to my own children, continuing the true Harrison legacy. As I sit here reflecting on this journey, I wonder about your own experiences with family expectations and inheritance. Have you ever had to choose between meeting others' expectations and following your own path? How did you navigate that challenge? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more real-life experiences about family, integrity, and finding your own way forward. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, true wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by the values you live by. Until next time.